I'm Billy Hollowell, host of CBN's new documentary investigating the supernatural miracles. Now, the interview that you're about to watch details an incredible miracle story, but I want to briefly talk about our film, which tells different stories that will deeply challenge you, inspire you, and get you thinking deeper about evidence for the supernatural. Before we air today's interview, please check out this 60-second trailer for investigating the supernatural miracles. You can head on over to cbn.com/supernatural to watch the film. Here's the trailer.
I got out of my patrol car and I slipped.
I went from having a promising career as a neuroscientist to having a medical death sentence.
I said there was nothing else that we could do. There was no heartbeat.
Time of death, 8:05.
Are miracles real? Do they happen today? Let's investigate.
A lot of skeptics will say, well, miracles are impossible. Why? Because they violate the laws of nature. You can't violate the laws of nature.
People would pray for me, and sometimes it felt like this power that just zapped me.
When I woke up, she says, "Can you do anything that you didn't do before?" I looked at my hand that was clutched. I said, "Hand, move."
He's dead. It's over. I said, shock him one more time.
Well, maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. Let's look at the evidence.
And here is today's interview, which we hope will deeply inspire you. Well, I am so excited to get a chance to talk with you. You know, you and I connected over text. Your brother Kirk got us connected, and I had been meaning to get in touch with you for a long time. You've got an incredible book called Overlooked that we'll talk about. But, you know, there's so many different elements, but I want to start with this. Really, it's a miracle story, and there's some heartbreak in it too, but there's so much. You know, I was with your brother. He was telling me this story about you and a miscarriage that you had. And it was one of the most powerful. I had chills hearing this story. And so let me just turn it over to you to take us through this, because your mother really had a feeling after you had this miscarriage and gave you advice and you listened to it. So just tell us the story, because there's so much to this.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So in August of 2005, my husband and I found out that we were pregnant with our third child. And jokingly, my husband said, "Wouldn't it be so fun if we had twins?" And I thought, okay, babe, let's just pray for one healthy child. I'm only 4'11", so I don't know if having twins would be the right, thing for me, but, that would be super fun, but let's just pray for one healthy child. So, when I was about 9 weeks along, we have two older boys as well. So my oldest son, Cameron, and then he was a toddler at the time. And then our middle son, Everett, was, not too far behind him. But I had taken the boys out for a nap, to go shopping, and brought them home to take a nap. And I laid down myself because being, pregnant, I was just very, very tired, much more exhausted this time than my other two pregnancies. And so I laid down for a nap as well. And I don't know how much time passed, but I woke up suddenly to feeling a gush. And any pregnant woman knows that's not the kind of feeling you want to have when you're pregnant. And in my mind, I kind of thought, okay, this is not good. But I just kept praying and pleading to the Lord, God, please, just don't let this be what I think it is. And sure enough, when I was in our bathroom at home, I was miscarrying. And so I called my husband, told him to meet me at the hospital, called my neighbor to have her come over, take me to the hospital, have her husband watch the boys. And in that, I also called my mom and told her that I was miscarrying. She lives about 3 hours away from where we are. And she just had some words for me that just, at the time, I really didn't understand why she was so adamant. But now, I do. My mom told me, do not let the doctors take you to the OR until they've done an ultrasound in your hospital room. And I told her, Mom, these are doctors and nurses. They know what they're doing. And she said, Bridgette, please, I'm begging you, don't let them take you into the OR. I've just heard way too many stories of women that have gone in there and had a DNC and they didn't need to be, whatever the situation. So when I got to the hospital, I demanded an ultrasound in my room. And I became the problem patient in room 3 because they wanted to take me to the OR immediately. They were prepping me, the whole thing. And
so you were listening to your mom. What made you listen to her? And was that something that normally you would have listened if she said, was there something telling you? Was it God?
Yeah, it was just inner voice. It was just, this was something different that she was just pleading with me. And I just said, okay, I will not let them do it. And so when my husband got to the hospital too, he looked at the nurse and he said, she's not going anywhere. You're going to do the ultrasound right here. And so again, I became the problem patient. They brought the ultrasound machine in my room and they did an ultrasound. And I'll never forget the technician. She looked at me, she looked at the monitor, she looked at me, and she looked at the monitor, and I just yelled at her, "What? Why do you keep looking at me like that?" And with tears in her eyes, she said, "You're still pregnant." And I just looked at her, and with tears in my eyes, I wanted to literally punch her in the face at that moment because I was home in my bathroom. God told me, "This is your daughter. You need to say goodbye." And I miscarried my child. And how dare she tell me that I was still pregnant? She turned the monitor and there was a beautiful heartbeat. And so it was just all of these questions like, what is going on? Like, I clearly held my baby in my bathroom at home at 9 weeks. And God told me, this is your baby, it's time to say goodbye. But yet she's telling me I'm still pregnant. Well, by the grace of God, I went on to have a normal pregnancy. I was released. I obviously did not have a DNC that day. And
can I pause? Can I just pause you there? Because there's so many things that you're sitting there, you're seeing this heartbeat now. Those doctors and nurses would have taken you back for a DNC potentially, right? Had you not asked for that. I just want to emphasize this. Had your mom not said it, you not asked for it and demanded it, that heartbeat, they wouldn't have known it was there, right?
Absolutely. And at that time, like I said, they were prepping me to take me back to the OR. I had the IV, I had everything going, and all they had to do was bring me back there. And because maybe I was going nuts or crazy, they maybe would have put me out and done a DNC without checking first. So, again, if it weren't for my mom, if it weren't for, my husband also demanding and me demanding, our daughter that we did get to, that I did get to carry full term. We have a beautiful daughter, Reese, who was born in March of 2006. And
you were pregnant with twins. When your husband said that, you were pregnant with twins. I mean,
the whole story is just, it's so God, because it's like, once I finally got out of the hospital, the doctor who delivered my boys said, "I want you to go to a specialist." And so I did. That doctor did another ultrasound, and that is where we learned that I was actually carrying twins. There was still a heartbeat, but he said there is an empty sac, and that must have been the child that you miscarried at home that you said that you saw. And so they basically just said, your body's going to decide to do with the other child. But like, I mentioned, I went on to have a beautiful pregnancy, and our daughter Reese was born in March. Yeah.
So you have that miracle, which is, you have this loss, you're preparing. I mean, it's just like the emotions that you were having, I can't even imagine throughout this entire ordeal. Then you go on, you have a normal pregnancy. Now, there was another part of this story that Kirk shared as well about your daughter, Reese. And this just blew me away. I mean, I think both of us probably had some tears in our eyes as he was describing this. Talk about Reese and what she said to you. Was she 4 years old? How old was she at the time?
She was about 4 or 5, and she and I were in my room. It was just her and I in the house, nobody else. She was sitting on my lap, and we were playing and talking. And out of nowhere, she just stopped our conversation, looked me directly in the eyes and said, "Mommy, do I have a sister?" And it was like I was gut punched at that point.
Wow.
Because I thought, how would she know that she has a sister? John and I have never said anything to her. At 4 years old, how do you tell a child that young that you have an identical twin sister that was in my tummy with you? Like, how do you explain that to a child? And so John and I wanted to wait till she was a little bit older to maybe understand better.
Sure.
But
sure.
At that moment when she asked me, I heard God say to me, it's time to tell Reese about her sister. But again, I just thought, how is she going to understand this? And so I looked at her and I said, "Why do you ask me that, honey?" And she said, "Mommy, there's a little girl that comes to me in my dreams and she wants to talk to me and play." And I said, "Do you see her a lot?" Whew. And she said, "All the time."
Wow.
And that was the moment that I got to share with her sister Sophia, who is in heaven. And yes, you have a twin sister. And it's so funny. I just want to share this really funny moment. When Reese went to kindergarten, again, she's got 2 older brothers. And they, when they went through kindergarten and it was Reese's turn, they all just ended up having the same teacher at the time that they went to kindergarten. And when my boys went, they did this project where they got to build their family out of Legos, and then you get to stand up and talk about your family. And so the boys did it. And then it was, Reese's time. And the teachers called me and said, "Mrs. Ridenour, we think you should know that Reese is talking about a little girl named Sophia that she calls her sister. Is this like an imaginary friend or da-da-da?" And I thought, oh my gosh, I never told you guys that no, like they do have another sister. So it was just funny. And they were like, oh my goodness, we had no idea. So after we told Reese, she just couldn't stop talking about her sister. And
wow.
Yeah.
And those dreams, it's so fascinating to me to hear. I mean, here's this little girl who has no idea, right? And she's having these dreams. Did those dreams continue for her? Did she have those, after that even?
Yeah. I mean, while she was younger, she did. I noticed her wanting her sister more at night, obviously, when she was trying to go to sleep. It was nothing kind of like any kind of night terrors or anything like that. But my boys are so close in age, and she could see the bond that her 2 brothers had. And she wanted that bond so badly with her sister. And being the creative young child that she was and still is, she would make videos for John and I where she would split the screen and she would have one outfit on as Sophia and one outfit on as Reese. And they would just have this interaction. And we were just like, oh my goodness, like it was just amazing to us that, it's only God. I mean, like I said, John and I never said anything to her. So it's only God that she saw her sister and was visited by her.
Yeah. I mean, how did it change the way as a Christian that you saw how God speaks to us, maybe, right? Because I think that's people will say all different things about the way they hear the voice of God, that it's sort of an inner voice, or sometimes they just, they feel the Holy Spirit compelling them. Did it transform or shift the way at that point you were thinking about how God might communicate with us?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just, you can't explain it. I mean, there's just times when God has spoken to me, and I talk about other stories in my book, Overlooked, about how God spoke to me and gave me specific things. And these are just things that like, you can't get from just, anywhere else. And because, of my faith and what I believe and the miracles that God has shown us in the Bible and just, in other things, it makes me just know that God is real. God is around us all the time. And we just have to open our hearts and our minds to what he wants to share with us.
Well, let's talk about Overlooked, because this is a book obviously close to your heart, sharing stories from your family and your life. And why did you title it that, and why did you write it?
Oh my goodness. The title Overlooked just kind of came after the story was written. We were kind of just going back and forth with some different titles, my co-author, Renee, and she kind of mentioned the word overlooked, and I was like, I just kind of, I wasn't sure about it, but then it just kind of stuck. And again, it was just one of those moments that God was just like, this is right, and Overlooked became after I started doing my speaking journey, my speaking career. I got the opportunity to go and share my story at some women's conferences and churches. And I had a lot of women come up and say, oh, my friend couldn't be here, or so-and-so. Do you have a book that I could buy? And I thought, oh gosh, no, I don't. And then again, it was just those nudges from God telling me, now is time to write your book. And so I was blessed by being introduced to Renee Gutteridge, my co-writer. And it's just another God moment where she was introduced to me, but she knew nothing about me or my story. And at first she kept saying, no, I really don't want to do a memoir. That's just not in my wheelhouse. And God kept saying, talk to this girl, talk to this girl, talk to this girl. So she finally was like, okay, God, I'll talk to her. And so she and I had this beautiful conversation. And immediately after sharing my story, she said, I want to help you write your book.
Wow.
And again, just only God could have put the two of us together and created this book that has just blessed me. And I just had no idea that it would do so much.
That's incredible.
I'm so thankful.
So, okay, I have to ask you this too, because, over the years, I've had a chance to tell Kirk's story, your sister Candace's story many times, how they came to faith, and I find your family dynamic with your parents and them coming to faith so interesting. But I want to know your journey. How old were you when you accepted Christ? What did that look like for you? Take us through that.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, Kirk was at the height of his career. Now, Kirk and I are 10 and a half months apart. So, super close. And I started noticing Kirk changing just a little bit in the way that he treated his sisters. He wasn't like this, guy who just tortured his sisters, anymore. I kind of started noticing like his character on Growing Pains started changing, just things like that. Our parents were separated at the time. Kirk was a senior. I was a junior in high school, and our parents separated. And I share with people that our family was the perfect CEO of Christianity. And what I mean by that is we were Christmas and Easter only. That's when we went to church, which I'm sure some of your listeners will say, that was me. That was our family. That was us. My dad was an atheist. My mom knew Christ as a young child, but it was not something that we grew up with in our home. But when Kirk heard the gospel for the very first time by going to church and hearing the message and the pastor going through the 10 Commandments and saying, if you were to go by this and your own, convictions or whatever, would you be going to heaven or hell? And Kirk was like, I'd be going to hell. And, he prayed the most raw and real prayer. And, when we started seeing him act a little bit different, I was very curious, like, Kirk, what is going on? Because you have totally changed. And it wasn't like Kirk just came home and just, dumped all of this religion or faith or relationship with the Lord on us. It was just like little, planting little seeds. And because Kirk and I are so close in age, I just respected him. I looked up to him in so many ways as being my big brother. I mean, even now, our relationship is incredible. There's 4 siblings in our family, and the relationship that the 4 of us have now is just absolutely amazing. But Kirk was 17. I was 16 at the time. And, I went to church with Kirk to a worship concert. And I was just bawling my eyes out listening to the message. Now, Kirk, again, had been a Christian for quite some time. And I was just crying, and Kirk, and I knew that there was just this void in my life and my heart. And I loved seeing what Kirk, was how Kirk was changing. And he said, do you want to go up and accept Christ into your heart? Because the pastor had given that invitation. And I said, yes. So Kirk brought me up to the front of the church, and he prayed with me the sinner's prayer. And again, I probably prayed the most raw and real prayer I've ever prayed in my life. And that was it. And so it just kind of trickled down into other siblings, other family members. Now, our dad is a school teacher, or was a school teacher for 30 some years. And it took him a really long time. But our dad finally accepted Christ into his heart. Kirk got to baptize him on a men's getaway. But the best thing is that our parents stayed together. They never divorced, and they'll be married, I think, 55 years this year. So
wow.
What an incredible journey that we had. And, for people to hear that we didn't grow up in a Christian home. You see Candace, you see Kirk. Now, maybe you might see me, and you think, oh, that's just how they were raised. No, it wasn't. But God sure had a plan for us.
It's amazing how one person too coming to faith in a family can transform the entire family. God works through that, right? You respected Kirk. He brought you. I mean, that is just amazing. And, the impact that all of you have, is huge because of that, right? And the platforms that you have. And so I'm just so appreciative of you sharing your story. Now, I have to ask you this, because you talked about the book and being at conferences, and before having the book, not really having one to point people towards. You now have the book Overlooked, which people can go and buy and grab copies of wherever books are sold. What are you hoping the impact of this book long-term is on people's lives?
I just really hope and pray. I struggled with watching two of my siblings grow up and become famous. I mean, during our childhood, it was great. It was fun. It was exciting. But I struggled with it because I was really the reason why my mom finally agreed to take us to Hollywood. I was the little performer, not Kirk, not Candace. And so the fact that I wasn't chosen that day, in my mom's heart, she was crushed. It just never panned out that I would be in front of the camera. But behind the scenes, I did have a beautiful career in the industry as a child stand-in. But I really just hope that people will read this book and just know that God has a plan and a purpose for all of us. And he writes a better story than we do. He's never overlooked you. God created us. He created every single one of us, and he's given you the gifts and the talents for you. Everybody's story is different. My story is not the same as yours or others, but I just hope that people will read this book and just have this feeling of knowing that God sees you. God hasn't overlooked you. God has not forgotten about you. And I'm sure in some point of our lives, we've all felt overlooked at some point. But I just want people to know that God has a plan and a purpose for you in different aspects, and trust in him. Have faith in him that if it's in his plan, that he will open the doors that he wants you to walk through. And they may not be your plans. Most of the time, they're not our plans for us, right?
So true.
It's
so
not
true.
our plan. God says, no, I want to bring you here. And if that door opens, go through it, follow through it, and let God lead. Let God write your story. Because it's bigger and better than we could ever imagine.
Well, I so appreciate you taking the time today, taking us through your miracle story, which is just incredible, talking about the book, your family coming to faith. The book is Overlooked, and people can get it wherever books are sold. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.